You ready?
I'll leave it up to you then.
20 seconds on the clock, please. Name something a dog might bring to the dog park if they had a show and tell.
Ball.
Fill in the blank. Paper, blank.
Plane.
Name a part of a tree.
Branch.
Besides a fly swatter, what do you swat bugs with?
Newspaper.
Name a state with a large population.
California.
Come on, man, let's go. All right, here we go. Name something that a dog might bring to the dog park if they had a show and tell. You said, bring ball. Survey said. Fill in the blank. Paper, blank. You said, paper plane. Survey said. Name a part of a tree. You said, branch. Survey said.
Good.
Okay.
Besides a fly swatter, what do you swat bugs with? You said.
No, Josh has
Newspaper. Survey said. Name a state with a large population. You said. Cali. Survey said. Yeah. Let him stay out here. You do that, I'll just let you stay out here, man. All right, let's just get on to your best. Let's remind everyone of Josh's answers. 25 seconds on the clock, please. Name something a dog might bring to the dog park if they had a show and tell.
A ball?
Try again.
A bone.
Fill in the blank. Paper, blank.
Or plastic.
Name a part of a tree.
The trunk.
Besides a fly swatter, what do you swat bugs with?
A slipper.
Name a state with a large population.
New York.
We need 8 points.
All right, come on, come on.
Name something a dog might bring to the dog park if they had a show and tell. You said, might bring a bone. Survey said. Tree or trunk, swat bugs with newspaper.
Or I guess you're gonna intro us.
Yeah, yeah. And you can say if you want to.
Yes, we have to have another Google, so if you want to come get some. Good morning, good morning. Come to the bottom.
give people another minute. I'm sure people will start rolling in after the talk starts. As you know, I've learned that it's good to get here early so that you can sit instead of standing. The first talk I went to yesterday, I sat on the floor for the entire time. So yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you all didn't stay out at the after parties too late last night and you got up nice and bright and early this morning. Our session today is From Figma to Function, Bridging Design and Development with Storybook and Drupal. I am Nathan Haas, Creative Lead and Design Ops. Josh?
Oh, and I'm Josh Hunter, Senior Front-End Dev at Sandstorm.
A little bit about Sandstorm. We're a UX creative and development shop based out of Chicago. So we were really excited to see that DrupalCon is coming to Chicago next year. So definitely follow us and keep an eye out for some events for next year. We're going to do some cool stuff. As you see on screen, we're accessibility certified, creative agency for over 25 plus years. We have a lot of expertise in associations, global nonprofits, and higher ed. Everything we do is in-house, design, UX, IA, development. We do a lot of really nice auditing work with accessibility. We are certified in accessibility, Drupal, Pantheon, Acquia, all of the wonderful stuff, and we are a women-owned business. So we have a wide range, as I said, about interdisciplinary team, so doing all of the wide range of items. Goal of this session is to do a hands-on workshop, so we're going to be doing live demos, so please be nice and patient with us if things don't work the way that they should. So you're going to be learning from me, the designer, Josh, the developer, of how we really take our work from Figma, put it into Storybook, and then into Drupal. Most, show of hands, people familiar with Figma? Pretty much the entire audience, so these things are here for documentation that you can share with your team. We don't need to really dive into what Figma is. Most of you know the benefits. There's scalable design system, tokens, libraries, auto layout. For dev, I'll just do your part. There's the dev mode for inspecting. It makes things very seamless. What we're going to talk about today, because there's components, we kind of follow our approach to atomic design. I wasn't very good at science in college or in high school or ever, so I don't really know the difference between a molecule or an atom, so we simplified it into our terms. So we have styles, which are colors and fonts, and then we go up to elements, which are then styles put together like a button, and then components such as a card. We have a base built out, we have a base built out that we've identified 40 plus components that are used on every website. Every website has a card component, a call out component, a header. So all of these components that we can really have a base to start from and then build out. So we got this approval from the client that this is the card, and I'm hopefully gonna go in and demo and, maybe not fumble around with Josh's computer because he's got different settings. So in our Figma file, as I said, we have all of our styles, our elements, and then we have our components. This is our base that we're continuing to build and build and build. And we'll talk about some of the benefits of our base. So as you can see here on screen, we're showing our base card on the left, approved creative on the right. And this will be kind of like a diet version of us going through and taking what is approved from the client and then executing it in our design system so that we can then go to dev. So the first thing to go through is to get our card updated, and hopefully I don't fumble around too much like I already am. But going through and getting the card styled up, pretty similar to what we have on the right side. So we need a little bit of space, and I'm really sorry. Things aren't, there we go. We need to get a little bit of space between the image element. We're gonna go through and get rid of that stroke there. We don't need any of the radius around it, but we can add a stroke on the left side. And then that stroke has a color set on it. So let's grab that. And we're gonna add that there. Oop. I was trying to get into this image and get rid of the margin around it, but it's not letting me do it here. But what's really nice about this, like, I'm not gonna get into all the nuance, but we have our local variables set up, so we can come in here and set up our different styles. So this is really nice for your design system to be able to make a few quick changes here and there to get all of the styles throughout. So I know that the heading style for this is Source Sans Pro. So you can see the heading on the base card, that style is updated. The body is also Source Sans Pro. Oop. So you can see going through, things are getting closer. We don't really need this button, so we can come in here and turn that off. We don't have a subhead, so we can go ahead and hide that. This here will become the date. So we can just make it, Gen 10, 2025. And this gives the developers an idea of what we need to do to get this over the fence to be built. So just, it's getting closer there. I have no idea why I can't get in and get rid of the padding here. I don't know if Josh has some things hidden that I just can't get into. There we go. Because I want to get this, pixel perfect for everyone. So it's pretty close. There's a couple colors. There's some spacing that I'm not going to have you all watch me because the most important stuff is what Josh does on the other end. But what's really nice is anywhere that this card lives in our base is now going to be updated. So I made the edit once, and it carries through to in Figma to the rest of the design system. So anywhere this card kind of lives across, it'll work really nicely. So that's the Figma demo. How many people are familiar with Storybook? A good portion of people as well. So there's been a few talks that I'm sure we've all been to together where we're moving into this experience builder world, and hopefully there will eventually be some sort of package that is handed off that is Figma, it is Storybook, and how we get into Drupal. But what we have for you today is what we're doing right now. Something that is actionable now, because Experience Builder, it's going to be amazing, but we've got a year until we may be stable. So you're familiar with Storybook. It's really nice to be able to get it into into Drupal, it's our way to have that single source of truth for our design systems.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. As I said, I'm Josh Hunter. I'm a front-end designer or developer at Sandstorm. And I just want to highlight some of the benefits that we've seen using this method. There's no real need for Drupal configurations. Who here's a developer, first of all? Okay, a good amount, by show of hands. And how many times have you been in a situation where creative and design has just gone ahead, made the beautiful site, but the client is still in the process of getting requirements and the architecture of the site defined, and you're kind of sitting on your hands waiting until that's defined to go in and start building the front end? Is that a common theme for developers? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Cool, I'm not alone. Awesome. So the nice thing about this approach is that we can build the front end components, DQA them, and get through, depending on the complexity of the site, around 80% of the front end done before that stuff is in place. And that accelerates development immensely. We've seen massive gains while implementing this process. And also, it's not on here, but as Nathan said, it also creates one source of truth, one source of a bucket of the files controlling that component. So you don't have to look in 5 files for different styles that are, styling different entities, and command find, and oh, did I miss this class? I have to make a late adjustment, a retroactive change. Did I miss it somewhere? It's all powered by one component, which is the way they're supposed to work. So that's great. Let's see. Okay, so before we get into the actual demo and code, I do want to highlight just briefly kind of what we have running under the hood for our compiling process and local development. So we are running with ddev and Docker, and we are using Vite.js. Let me zoom in on this, because when we switched to this screen, everything got real small.
Someone had a really cool Zoom PowerPointer.
And we wanted it, but
I don't know who it was.
didn't work out for us. So we have a simple Vite.js file. It's just looking at our source folder and grabbing all the JS and CSS files it may find, and then sending them to a dist folder that's accessible to Drupal, and putting the CSS in a CSS folder and the JS in a JS folder. Another thing I want to highlight is we're using a plugin that works with Vite for Twig and Drupal. And I also want to highlight, thank you Git for reminding me, a developer who couldn't make it to DrupalCon, Madeline Jensen. She also was the tip of the spear in collaborating with this DevOps workflow. So I just want to give her credit where credit is due. But this Twig Drupal plugin basically allows us to write Twig in our components and for it to not break everything. The short story version of that. So let me just make sure we're on board here. Okay, so before I get into building out a story, we're going to be focusing on the card that Nathan was looking at in the Figma design. And we're trying to leverage the concept of variables and components from the Figma perspective. So Nathan will lay out colors, he'll lay out spacing, he'll lay out typography variables and adjustments that he wants to transition across the whole site. So when we're developing, we're also using that methodology, that approach, and creating variables that pull those values in. So in Storybook, you need 3 files, 4 if you want it to look pretty. We need a stories JSX file where we're going to define our component. A template file, we're going to use a Twig file for the markup output. A YAML file to send data to the component for the Storybook side of rendering. And CSS or .css, Sass file, we're using Sass right now, to style it. So if we go to our code here, I'm going to run npm run watch. Okay, so our Storybook's loaded. This is local. And so we have our color variables here. I want to preface this with, this is our base build that we usually start on clean slate projects. We're also in the process of implementing this idea of componentization to existing projects, because we've seen performance gains and we've also seen efficiencies in managing styles. But I've also scaled this version back because we don't want to give away everything we have. But we have our colors here, and then we have our typography. We have examples of, your H1 mobile and desktop view all the way down to, I think, H5. And then we have some body styles, menu styles. And then we have our, simple components. Just a very simple collection of things that we see used on sites all the time, and you've coded it 50 billion times, and you're like, oh my God, am I doing this again? So this is just a nicer starting point, kind of a base level where we have some of the legwork done initially out the gate. So we have our button here, which Nathan is part of, it's an element of the card we're gonna be building. So we have a button, we have some variations here, and we have an example of what it might look like against a color background, etc. We're also gonna be using the tag element, which you saw as kind of like the eyebrow piece of that card. And then down here, we have our card. And as you can see, this lines up with what Nathan had initially put in the base. So our base is built on all the components that are at the base level in Figma. Nathan had to make edits on the fly to kind of demonstrate his process. But this is based off of that base card. So what we're gonna do is now we're gonna go to our files. We're gonna go to our card folder. We're just gonna walk through the files being used here. So if we look first, we have our template, okay? And because we have the Twig Drupal plugin in use, we're gonna just write this with typical Twig. So if you're a Drupal developer, this is very familiar, very comfortable, which is nice because Storybook is a React-based framework, so you don't have to worry about too much of that getting busted. So we have a little blurb of how to use it, what this component expects you to pass to it. We have a Drupal-specific line here. I will touch on this later when we get to the step where we connect things to Drupal. We have some class array building with a variant class that can be received to alter some visual styles. And then down here is where we're receiving all our arguments or properties. So image, tag, title, subhead, description, CTA link, which would be our button. And it's important to note that we can write conditionals in Twig here. And another thing I want to note is that when I build out these components within Storybook, if you'll notice, I have wrapper classes around these outputs. So card image has a div around it. And this is because when Drupal outputs its fields, its entities, you don't know what that field, those classes are gonna be, right? It's based on the content type, it's on the display mode, things like that. So by wrapping the ambiguous data that is gonna get outputted, I know I can control it with these wrapper classes. So this allows us to move, we don't need to wait on the configuration now. And I love that, I hate that, waiting on it. But also to note is that we're including, via typical include syntax, the tag element here, and we're passing arguments that have been passed to the card along to the elements we're including. So the card is gonna pass the tag object it receives and pass those properties, tag text, tag link, tag variant, to the included tag element. The same concept applies to the button, okay? So that's our markup, great, but markup without data is ugly and useless. So to power this and to provide properties for this template, we have a YAML file. So here, we define an object or a collection of properties here, and we just pass these things which are going to in turn be outputted in our component. So as you can see, there's correlation. You got your image, your tag, title, subhead, description, and CTA. Great. Now we have to tell Storybook this thing exists, output it in the UI so everyone can look at it. So here is our standard stories JSX file. The prefix is going to be the name of the component. And we have to import the templates we're going to reference so we can export them as outputable data or visual representation of the component. And we have to import the data that we're going to output, that we're going to send to the component. So we're just going to look at the teaser card. But essentially and this is all Storybook, and the documentation on their site is very formidable. It really will get you a long way. But what's happening is here is we're telling it to render the card teaser, which you can see is this. We've defined it as this template. And we're gonna pass the arguments of card_teaser, which is in our data, which we import from our YAML file, which is this. Okay. And then, is everyone with me so far? Okay, cool. All right. And then, of course, to make it look pretty, we have our SAS file. I'm not gonna go too much into the variable breakout that we have here, because frankly, there's not as much time as I would like. But just the gist of it is we have these colors and variables defined based on what Nathan has handed over to me from Figma. So let's just go back to our card, remind ourselves what it looks like. Looks like the base. And I've done my homework because I knew I'd have to show everyone this. So I'm going to comment out some styles. I'm going to comment in some styles. Comment out, thank you. Give that a save. Let me just make sure our watch command is still running. Yep. Okay, we're gonna go back. And as you can see, we're now approaching more of what is expected in the end product. And can someone tell me what needs to be done? Button. Okay, cool. I'm gonna play a little trivia today.
I'm not ready to DQA it, so
Nathan isn't breathing down my neck yet, so. So we've got some stuff, like you said, that doesn't need to be there. So we don't need the button, and this is, when we start with the base, our mindset is we're not gonna add this stuff back in once we're done. Like, this is gonna be for the client. So we can remove the past CTA, and we know that the description is actually gonna become the date, so we're going to comment that back in. And then we're going to also pass a label URL, because in this template we have a check that says if that's passed, wrap the title of the card with a link. So we're going to update that, give that a save. Okay, now I think our card is very close. I think we don't need that little subhead piece. So I'm going to go in and remove that, save, and boom. Now I see a card that, in my brain, looks pretty damn close to what is expected. And I can also create other outputs within Storybook to represent other aspects of what has been defined in Figma. So here we have the 3-up that Nathan had down here. I don't think, hey, this heading's bigger than it should be. It should be smaller. And that's always a developer win. Okay. So this is nice because before we go on to the next slide, let's see here. So this is the correlation kind of our Figma variables to our Storybook output. If we look at the card here, and we bring this UI up, these line up with what has been defined in Figma and what we're talking about. So this is nice because now when Nathan and I are talking about things, we're speaking the same exact language and we're looking at the same source of truth. There's very little that gets lost in translation. Did you want to say?
Yeah, and this is about the time when Josh would hand it over to me, I would go through, and I'm DQAing directly in Storybook.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm in Storybook, I can go in and I can make this headline 2.5 paragraphs because all clients want these really giant headlines. So I can see what that looks like, see how it breaks, see how it looks on mobile, making sure that everything looks really good. And then once it's in Drupal, we do kind of like a glance over just to confirm, because it's always been correct when we get it from Storybook into Drupal. It's just making sure that there wasn't something missed and lost in translation.
Yeah, and you can test a lot of things. You could remove the image, so you can see what it would look like if there wasn't one, and et cetera, et cetera. And also, there's a nice tool in Storybook's UI that has accessibility checks. They're kind of basic, but they do help. They do flag certain things. If you have an image with no alt text, for example, it'll tell you. And you'll notice this tab controls, we have it, this is very bare bones, but you can really go very far with adding options and on-the-fly changes with drop-downs or radios within Storybook's dashboard. So Nathan doesn't have to type a long heading. I could maybe add a drop-down that changes what heading's outputted, or I could have a variant change class drop-down, things like that.
And another benefit of having this built in Storybook from our base is we've already run it through our accessibility audits.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not having to do that every single time you spin up a new site.
Yes. So great, we've got our component. It looks great. It's gone through Nathan's eagle-eye scrutiny, and he's like, yeah, you actually did your job. Cool. So I'm like, great. Now the final step, oh, that's actually nicer having it up there. The final step is to connect this all to Drupal. And there's been a lot of talk about new things coming down the pipeline. This has been the process we've implemented and used. We built iteratively on existing processes at Sandstorm, and this one has shown the most fruit. And I think it's really leveraging core Drupal. It's not crazy. Your layout builder, you're in paragraphs, you're in entity types and display modes. It's all familiar stuff. And we also wanted to build this Storybook base agnostic. We're a design agency, and to be realistic, we work with many different CMSs. So this works for what we do, and we've seen massive gains. So I'll show you now how we connect it to Drupal.
Just while you're connecting Drupal, our hope is, and I've had discussions with a few people after the talks yesterday, but our hope is there's wonderful stuff being built for Experience Builder with Figma, with Storybook. But our hope, and I'm sure there's some Drupal people in here, like high up, our hope is people that have these design systems already, we will hopefully be able to plug in and allow that base for Experience Builder to be for those organizations that don't have a base. So we're really hoping that if you have an existing design system in Storybook, hopefully we'll be able to tie that into Experience Builder.
Yeah.
Sometime.
Yeah, the way we've written our components, I'm assuming, I think it'll be easy to connect it to single directory components in the future. Okay, so now back to our demo. Nathan, just throwing the whole flow. No, it was great. Okay, so this is a base install of Drupal. You all know the basic page. You get it every time. I've defined a few fields. Nothing new here. If it is new to you and you're just new to Drupal, that's great. This is a very important piece. I don't want to downplay anybody's experience. But we have a body field, a category, which pulls from a vocabulary, an image field, and it's layout builder enabled for demonstration purposes. If we look at the display modes, I've defined a card teaser display mode. So whenever you define a display mode, I'm just going to say this out of formality, a template override is created that you can use and leverage for specific displaying. So what's nice about this also is all the settings we make here, they all get passed to the component. So the image styles we want to use, the trim we want to add to the body text, XYZ, that's all going to be passed and respected when it's outputted in our component. So we still have a lot of Drupal control over managing the data that gets sent from Drupal. Okay, so here's our demo page. It's so pretty. It's so accessible right now, you wouldn't believe it.
Let's launch.
Let's launch. Let's go. Just to show you what's making these come out, I have a layout builder enabled. I've created 2 blocks. The first one is a simple block, title, of course, intro text field, and a node lookup that's just pointing to the basic page content type. So it's an NTT reference. And actually, I closed one of my tabs. Hold on. Let's see. Yep. And here in the display settings for that block, I've told it that I wanted to use the card teaser display. This is very important. You gotta, cross your T's and dot your I's. I don't know. But just for reference, so now we're in line on the Drupal side, and then down here we have a different block, which I'll get to a little later to kind of leverage the power of this. But yeah, ugly, not pretty, not what we want to launch with unless we're crazy. So in our component, I usually make a folder, Drupal displays, template overrides, XYZ. I try to put everything that's going to be from the Drupal side using this component in a folder so that it's not confused what's powering Storybook and what's powering Drupal. So within this folder, we have our node teaser template already. I just copy the base node html.twig, leave all the documentation there that people don't read. And then I go to, I don't mess with any of the class attribute addition stuff happening here. And I don't mess with the title prefix or title suffix because we don't want Drupal to lose any of its functionality or intention on the entities when they're outputted. So we just want to say, hey, we want to make the stuff look pretty, but we want to leave everything else up to you. But where the component comes in is all the content output. So if we look here at this include, you'll notice it looks very similar to that YAML file that was powering the Storybook side of things. We have an image being passed, we have a tag being passed, title, subhead, description, CTA, and the only thing that's changing now is the source where that information is coming from. So this is where I'm like, yeah, that's cool. This stuff all, who can remind me what we removed from the YAML file? Thank you. This is why I'm a terrible developer. And subhead. Brownie points to the gentleman. And we have to add the label URL argument because we want our card to link. Okay, I'm going to save this and I'm going to do a little something. Now I'm going to expose this file and save it. And then I'm going to go to the page and refresh. What? What happened? I didn't do the cache refresh. Oh, you got it. Yeah, turn the developer mode on. I forgot to do that. All right. I'll just clear it in the CI. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we give this a nice refresh. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay. So as you can see here, we're outputting a lot of lorem ipsum. This is pulling from the body field that we've set to trim to 180 characters. And that's not what I want. I think I want the publish at, I think that's what it was. I want the date.
And we would traditionally have the date as its own line,
Oh,
but
shit.
for demo purposes, we're just reusing the description there.
Yeah. Let me refresh this again. Nope, that's the wrong name. I don't know what the name
Is
is.
that connected with Vite?
Huh?
Is that your Drupal display, is that getting fed to Drupal through Vite.js?
No. That's the nice thing about that. We're not worrying about this extra complexity. This is just a template that Drupal has access to
Oh, okay.
once we clear the
Drupal's
cache.
loading that.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do this for now because I don't want to deal with it. And that's the, sometimes you just don't want to deal with it. No?
Everything's going to be published on January 10th.
Yes. Forever. Okay, see, we got our cards. We have them displayed in the 3-up. When I send this to Nathan, I'm hoping he has something to say about it because I'd be hard-pressed to find anything wrong with it right now. It looks really good to me. So this is great because you saw I just created display mode. I connected it to a component. And the great thing about this is that any retroactive changes that might come down the pipeline from the client, I just need to go to that card component and make them. I can do that with confidence, knowing that the consistency of this component will be reflected across the site, wherever it's used. And that to me is the best part of it. Who's inherited a site and had to go through their files and find every instance of something wrong or something that needed to be adjusted? Just show of hands. Okay, okay, cool. I don't feel alone. Okay, so we have our card 3-up here. It's laid out really nice. And just to kind of show that the flexibility of this, we had that other block here. And this one is a paragraph field. So we have a card paragraph with a description, with a CTA. And let's say for whatever reason, the client wants this one to output the button. It wants it to output a long description and all that. It just wants more impact or whatever. We can go and do the exact same thing here. Oh, whoops, not delete. That would have been bad, bro. And if we look at this file here, it's the same concept. We just take the baseline template. We leave all the Drupal stuff that is being injected. We don't touch that. We just worry about the content output. Something nice here, and I've done this for demonstration purposes. I don't think there'd ever be a case for this scenario here. But I'm saying if the field image on this paragraph is empty, if it's not empty, output the card. If it is empty, output a simple card. So we're going to call our simple card component. I didn't go over it, but the concepts and principles that we just went over are the exact same. We're just passing things to the component. So if we go back to our page, give this a refresh, boom, we've got our cards outputted. And this button, I probably would have went through some design from Nathan, things like that. But you can see that you just create the template override. You just say, this is where you're getting your data from. Output my component for me. And it makes adding new features. Let's say you need to create a grid view. They're all using this. You don't need to worry about creating it anymore. And the nice thing about this also is that if Nathan wants this button to have different styles, everywhere the button is referenced in a component, that's referenced in a component on your site, gets that. It's all a trickle-down effect. So we've been working very hard internally to build a very strong base of these components so that the changes can be minimal and not break everything, but two, that across design, development, and UX, we're all speaking the same language. So here's our simple card. It obviously is still at the base level, but let's see here. Where are we? Went through that. Right. I always forget this part. I'm sorry, guys. I forgot something. Rewind all that great information. Just one last thing. I know I mentioned I would talk about it, and of course I didn't. Up here in the component, we have this attached library output in Twig. This is Drupal specific. It's not going to break your Storybook. But this is a very useful pre-processing in our theme that we use, which kind of it ensures that the styles and the JavaScript for these components are only called when the component is rendered, as opposed to having a huge glob file of JS and CSS that you get warned about on your site performance reviews, and you're like, God, how do I fix this? So in our theme file, we have a library info build hook. And what it's doing is it's pointing to the CSS and JS folders in dist and building out library buckets based on the file name. So this is important that at least for our standard, when we build out the components, the card.scss file and the JavaScript file, they both should have the prefix of card. So card.js and card.scss, they would get put into the same library. And that library is attached to the component via this code here. And it's given us a big performance boost because we don't have those glob files anymore, those huge monster resource hogs. And this is our markup here. We just went over this, but this is kind of the correlation you can see. On the left, we have the component we're calling, and on the right, we have the Drupal template that is using the component, passing information. And this is kind of the through line from Figma, Storybook to Drupal. And this has been huge for us. I mean, it's showing more and more benefits as we continue using it. So I just want to say that the last project we used this on, we came in at 65% of the budget. And it exponentially speeds up. As you build out more and more components for the site, creating the bigger and bigger pieces of that site is only easier and easier. So it's a snowball effect of speed and efficiency. I hope you could learn something. If anything, I want people to take away is that, you know, it's the three of us built this. It was a concentrated effort, but you can drastically increase your efficiency. And like, it really allows you to start focusing on building other cool new things or other efficiencies in your company or whatever, whoever you're working for. And with that, I believe you rock. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I'll ask all this after. Yes.
You can do your bit if you want.
No bit.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
There's one thing that I noticed you missed
Oh,
that wasn't in the folder, a component.yaml file. Which, if you had added it, would make the system recognize your component to be a single directory component.
Yes, this is next steps for us.
But
Yeah.
that was my initial question, and then I went through the process of trying to answer it myself, and I thought perhaps that could cause havoc for everything.
All right, so I will say this. It did cause havoc. We did have issues with the folder naming conventions that SDC uses in competition with our folders. So we're not there yet, but that is the next step because we know that's going to be, that is core, and we want to use that. So that's going to be our next step. But right now we're just kind of leveraging core Drupal concepts. But that is, I mean, we've had the talk internally, but we didn't want to talk about it because that's like, we're still figuring that one out. But thank you. Anyone else? Sir.
When Nathan reviews the design, like the builds in Storybook, does he run it locally?
Yeah, so I didn't mention this, but we serve it on our dev environment, and usually he goes to /storybook. But the output and dashboard he sees is exactly what we were looking at on my local.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so do you use single directory component in Storybook?
No.
Repeat the question.
The question is, do we use single directory components in Storybook, right? No, as I mentioned before, we're still trying to iron out the kinks with that process because single directory components does have a pretty strict naming convention that is in competition with some of the stuff we have, or some of our folder names in Storybook.
And can you use Tailwind?
You can use Tailwind, you can import the library and use it, but we opted for a more foundational approach with Sass and CSS. One of our next steps is also converting to vanilla CSS as it's now providing a lot of things that weren't provided before. Good?
The design question is, when you're working in Figma, and I saw you have like kind of your boilerplate components on the system, right? But as a designer, you're not really thinking, you're not building up components when you're doing your initial ideation, right? You're kind of just designing, you know the components you have to design for, but you're not componentizing them. That's kind of the step after you've kind of got your design in place, right?
Correct. The question was, do we work directly in that base with the existing components? And the answer is no. We leave that separate. We'll go through the whole process of traditionally clients want to see the home page, so we design the home page. Once the home page is approved, then we start working in that base, putting our theme over top of it, doing all of the styles and building that out, and then we can start doing subpages utilizing that base, because we can go through and go through the brand guidelines and update the fonts, the colors, and all that, and then that flows all through our base using the variables. We didn't really touch on variables, but we're getting to the point where we're hoping there's a connection between Figma variables and then into Storybook and into Drupal. We're hoping things become more seamless. We had that conversation yesterday of like, Figma's holding things and I don't know why. So if you work for Figma, let's talk and figure out why we can't make it more seamless.
So are you cloning the Figma base for every client?
Yes. Yep. So we just spin off that base and then we pull files in just to make it much more efficient.
How easy is it to collaborate on the
So the question is, how easy is it to collaborate in Storybook? It's really nice. We haven't done, I don't know if there's any features of commenting in Storybook. We primarily we live in Jira, so we'll spin up tickets for bugs and we'll squash those. But now, is there commenting functionality in Storybook that we don't know about? Because that would be wonderful. Any other questions?
Yeah, so for Figma, are they coming up with a way, like, once you design something, it actually generates code? Like, how they were talking about doing that?
They are talking about that. That's the conversation we've had. Is like, you can, with a plugin, you can type in a URL and it brings that entire website in and even does like auto layout. It's ugly, but it has some functionality there. That's the thing that I'm like, why is Figma holding on to this and not letting us, like, you can embed Figma into Storybook, but it's basically like a JPEG, right? It's not even like looking at, and there is a plugin that we saw that it like overlays something, but I don't know what that something is. Like if you go to Figma or storybook.com on their homepage, they have this. We're digging into that because it'll definitely speed up the process.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of answer your question. Figma's actually working really hard to go the other way. So they're doing Code Connect, which they want you to code your stuff first and then bring it to Figma and sort of because they like, I've been kind of in the space for a while and they found that none of the code generators are great. So they
Right.
decided to take the other backwards approach.
Yeah. And if you want to talk more about Figma, we have a booth and we can talk Figma all day. We also have custom sticker printers, so if you want like a custom sticker of your face or your loved one's face, we can do that as well. Any other questions? We've got time for a few more.
Have you explored like Chromatic's services for regression testing workflow, or do you have an alternative like such as Backstop or Lost Pixel?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Visual regression testing workflow. Do you have a third one, or mostly I'm interested if you've explored Chromatic's services and found that.
I cannot speak to that. Are you talking about visual regression in terms of changes in components?
Like, are you talking like DQA?
What's that?
Are you talking like DQA process or?
Yeah, an automated visual regression system.
We haven't, but let's talk after this.
Yeah. We have not implemented it as such. We're
Yeah.
still depending on our brains too much.
We definitely do it manual, and that's just kind of our flow. Like, definitely open to hearing
More
what other
tools.
creative dev teams are doing for that collaboration, because saving any time.
Have you done this for an organization that has like a lot of different sites, not necessarily Drupal? Because one challenge we've had is organizational-wide component library.
Mm.
You know, taking all the Drupalisms out. You did the template and you left the attributes in there and everything. But it's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is, has this been implemented for other organizations or with multiple sites? We are currently working on a build for WP, which is based using the same styles and a Twig plugin that works with WordPress. I dare not utter the word here, but I am not working on it. Another developer who specializes in that for our company is, and that's the slow progression. But we also keep it, we're building it out for what we do, and those are our typical CMSs we deal with. But that's the whole point of component approach, keeping agnostic, and trying to be as unopinionated with it as possible. Like I said, we're trying to go to vanilla CSS. We're trying to really make it able to work anywhere, like you suggest, which is the most optimal solution, yeah.
And just to go on to were you asking more like if you are higher ed and you have multiple websites, is there centralized with different styles for each of the sites, or?
Well, we ended up putting in the component library in libraries rather than the theme.
Yeah.
And that seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah.
And then the theme can override whatever it needs to do. But do you guys do like a base theme with all this stuff in it?
Base theme from?
With your components.
So we have the base theme in Storybook that we've built out, and we are in talks with a higher ed to try to get like a design system going for them, because they may be in your same situation where they have all of their websites are independent. It's not just they're working with one. So we're trying to get them to centralize.
Yeah, we have a site that was built out about 8 years ago in Pattern Lab, and I'm wondering, would you recommend trying to kind of lift and shift that to Storybook? Is that worthy for to maintain it in Pattern?
We have not had to do that. And so I cannot, the question was, have we converted from Pattern Lab to Storybook? We have not, so I won't pretend to know. But I've heard it is tough. Sorry.
I think we got one more.
Can you create variants in the Storybook library, like using YAML, like TLB or anything like that?
Yes. Let me show you something. So in our YAML file, we have our card teaser and we have our card simple, right? And these are two totally different components, right? So that you could say is variation. But if you noticed, we didn't do it here, but in the top here, we're receiving a variant class, and we can pass that as an argument, which can change a lot of visual things, hide or display certain things, X, Y, Z, based on CSS if we want. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah. Like Pattern Lab has a way of creating variants per component using the YAML file.
That's exactly right. We can do that with the YAML file here. So we have a card teaser, card simple, and we just need to have a template, a different template for each component if you want.
Well, this one.
Looks like you guys use standalone Storybook instance. Have you tried Storybook module in Drupal?
The question was, have we tried Storybook module in Drupal? We did initially try it, and we ran into issues. So we thought it wasn't ready for prime time, and this is what we built instead. So this has worked for us, and I hope it can give some people inspiration to hopefully implement something like it on your own. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.